Oh my goodness, Scotland, you never disappoint. I'm seeing places, I can hardly believe my eyes, the beach down there. It's extraordinary. I'm touring Scotland with the Mini 3 Pro, having a great time. I'm not going to lie. Absolutely love this drone. It performs so well. You have to remind yourself it's 249 grams. However, there are limitations, and it's fair to recognise limitations. There are different drones for different purposes, for different target markets. So we're going to talk about some of those limitations in this video. I'm going to get soaked, right? Plan B, see you in a bit. Stewart here, coming to you from the comfort and warmth of our home in out the rains from the Scottish Highlands. A lot of you are asking where Alina has been. She's still here, she's still working away behind the scenes, but making videos together as a couple has become a little bit tricky now. We have a young family, but stay tuned, lots of content from both of us coming soon. Like I said in the intro that I did in the Scottish Highlands, different drones for different purposes, for different target markets, for different budgets. So we need to keep that in mind when we assess or criticise or critique a product. Now, the Mini 3 Pro, it has the word Pro in the title. It's not inexpensive. I think that's fair to say. So I think it has to pass a fairly high bar when it comes to scrutiny. I know a lot of you are super excited by this product, and I am too. I just spent 10 days in the Scottish Highlands producing some of the best footage that we've ever captured with a drone, and it was done on the Mini 3 Pro. It can get the job done, let me tell you. However, as a pro user, if I may be so bold as to call myself that, flying the Mini 3 Pro, I have found some limitations, and I think, as I said, it's fair to talk about that. At risk of repeating myself, this is not a cheap product, and it does market itself as a pro drone. So let's get into that now. Being a small, lightweight drone, the Mini 3 Pro has less power than some of its bigger siblings. Now, we demonstrated in a video that the Mini 3 Pro can get the job done in crazy windy conditions. Do check that out, it's quite an entertaining look to see what the drone is capable of. However, on several occasions, I struggled to get the Mini 3 Pro back, even in sports mode, in very windy conditions, don't get me wrong, but conditions that, anecdotally at least, I don't think the Air 2S or certainly a Mavic 2 or a Mavic 3 would have any issue with whatsoever. When it's too windy, quick shots are cancelled mid-shot, panoramas are cancelled mid-shot, and it got to the point where I wasn't taking the Mini 3 Pro up in circumstances where I otherwise would have with a more powerful drone. If you're doing any kind of drone work where the outcome actually matters, so professional work with your Mini 3 Pro, and if you are anticipating hostile conditions, then I would suggest you consider looking elsewhere. At the very least, anticipate not getting that drone in the air or being restricted. It's one thing to fly the drone head height and it holds position. It's another thing to take it up 100 meters, 500 meters away. There are situations where you might not get that drone back. I've crashed the Mini 3 Pro twice now, flying sideways, doing orbits with point of interest. I've nearly crashed it 200 times. There are no sideways obstacle avoidance sensors, nor are there on many of the other drones, but you do get them on the Mavic 2 Pro and Zoom when you're using tripod mode and active track, and you do get full omnidirectional obstacle avoidance on your Mavic 3. The Mini 3 Pro is cheaper than those drones, but if you smash it and have to buy another one, then it starts to get expensive. Now, this is all down to you and how much you trust yourself and how responsible you are with your drone, but accidents can happen, and it's definitely something to keep in mind. The new DJI RC controller is lovely. It's a great addition to the DJI lineup. It's also good value, especially when you look at the RC Pro. You need to mortgage your house to buy one of those. Bundle this with the Mini 3 Pro, happy days. However, the screen is only 700 nits of brightness. It's sustained brightness, which is good. It won't go dim like your iPhone or whatever, but it's only 700 nits. So I find myself hovering over the controller regularly to try and check my exposure. We're professionals here, remember, and you must expose correctly at the time of capture. If you have blown out highlights, you're not going to recover those in post. As a consequence, I shoot in D-Cinelike, the flat color profile. I tend to underexpose a little bit just to make sure I protect those highlights, always with reference to the histogram, so we have an objective measure of exposure. But the sum total of all of that is that it can be really quite hard to see what's going on with the screen. If you've already invested in some kind of controller tablet combination that gives you better brightness than this, and you're not that bothered about the practicality and portability concerns, then I would stick with that. Does the 250 gram threshold thingamajig matter to you? There's two implications that I can think of: regulation and practicality. Some of you might not be bothered by the regulatory concerns that come with 250 grams or more drones. You just do a little online test or whatever is required just to certify you for flying those drones. Second of all, in terms of practicality, does it really matter to you whether your drone is 250 grams or 600 grams? For some people, yes. Now for me, on this trip, I think it did matter, to be honest with you. I was able to get the drone in my pocket, run up hills and have a great time. I've had people say in the comments, who puts drones in their pockets and runs up hills? I do. That's exactly what I do. And every gram matters in that situation. But for a lot of you, this doesn't matter. If it doesn't matter, Air 2S isn't that much more expensive. It's superior in many, many ways. The Mini 3 Pro has a fixed aperture of f1.7, which is very nice, lets in lots of light to the sensor. However, it is fixed, and for us drone enthusiasts, the aperture only really has one function, and that's to control the amount of light getting to the sensor. We're not bothered about shallow depth of field. 99.9% of the time, everything is going to be in focus. Now, variable aperture becomes very useful when you're shooting with neutral density filters. Take the drone up into the sky, lighting conditions change, you can tweak the aperture to adjust the exposure and maintain your shutter speed of double the frame rate and all that kind of stuff. If you have a fixed aperture, you might have to land the drone, change out the ND filter. If that was all gobbledygook to you, then I'll put a link to our ND filter tutorials. People get very confused about this subject. We can teach you everything you need to know. Speaking of teaching you things, do grab yourself a copy of our free ebook From Drone Zero to Drone Hero, 37 tips to get you flying like a filmmaker. You might be interested in our drone comparison chart so you can instantly see which drones have variable aperture, which have fixed apertures. And do check the links in the description to our premium content. We have a lovely drone cinematography masterclass that I know you will enjoy. Next on the list, I have that the Mini 3 Pro only shoots 8-bit video and there's no D-Log color profile. Now, last night I found out that there was an upgrade to the firmware and we now get 10-bit video with the Mini 3 Pro. This is great news, more color depth within the already predefined dynamic range. Now, I have missed that color depth many times where I was flying. I'm trying to protect the highlights in the clouds, in the sky. I don't want blown out sections of my image, but I don't want things to be too dark on the ground either. And this is one of the battles that we have, balancing our exposures and taking account of where the sun is and all this kind of stuff. Now we have the option of shooting 10-bit. It should make the process of raising those shadows and midtones in post a little bit less destructive. Remember what I was saying about how I underexpose a little bit just to protect those highlights? Well, it puts a lot of pressure on that image when it comes to grading it and correcting it in post. So that's great, that's an amazing development. But for the purists out there, at the moment at least, we still don't get D-Log, which in theory gives us more dynamic range and more flexibility in post. If you're at that level, and some of you are, then you will need to look elsewhere to the likes of a Mavic 2 Pro, an Air 2S or a Mavic 3. The Mini 3 Pro's resolution tops out at 4K. Now, I love shooting the 5.4K resolution that we get with the Air 2S. The reason being it allows us to crop in post with less destruction to the image quality. Why do we like to crop in post? Well, first of all, it lets you get closer to things that are far away, but more excitingly than that, it lets you compress the layers of foreground, midground and background, enhancing those parallax effects when you're rotating around subjects or revealing new layers of background in the frame. I love that look, and produce some amazing shots with the Mini 3 Pro using the 2x digital zoom that we get there and then in the app. However, if you're pixel peeping, you do spot a deterioration in quality, and if you are operating at a higher level, that might not be acceptable. Like I say, the Air 2S gives you 5.4K and the Mavic 3 gives you 5.12K. Speaking of parallax, the Mini 3 Pro only has one camera. The Mavic 3 has two cameras. Now that's an awfully expensive upgrade to get access to a 7x telephoto zoom lens, which has slightly crummy image quality if I'm honest with you. But like I said, the second the Mavic 3 came out, you can get some amazing parallax shots with that 7x zoom lens. This for me is the future of consumer and prosumer drone cinematography, getting access to those kind of perspectives that we used to see with those 90s and 2000s helicopter gyro-stabilized aerial shots that are just so epic and so cool, and now we have access to that with the Mavic 3. Like I say though, it is a bit of a pricey upgrade for that one shot type. Within the Focus Track suite of intelligent flight modes, we get Active Track 4.0 on the Mini 3 Pro, which does a very, very impressive job. We have got some bonkers crazy shots using the various Focus Track options. However, the Mavic 3 did take that to the next level with Active Track 5.0. It has much better anticipation of where the subject is going to be if it's obstructed mid-shot. It takes better advantage of the APAS 5.0, I think it is, with the Mavic 3, so we have a bit of weaving in and out of trees and all that kind of stuff. It's also a little bit hit or miss, that technology, for different reasons. Do check out the video if you're just curious to see what's going on there, but I'm just mentioning it for your information. The final reason the Mini 3 Pro might not be for you is you've already got a perfectly good drone. Let's be honest, the Mini 3 Pro is taking established technology from DJI and cramming it into a smaller and more affordable package. That's why it's so exciting, particularly the fact that it's small. But if you have a Mavic Air 2, even a Phantom 4, you're going to struggle to tell the difference between any of the footage from all of these drones, quite frankly, in the last 5 years or so, especially if it's in nice bright daylight and so on and so forth. So, strong recommendation, as always, for the 5 years that we've been doing this channel. Focus on building your skills, try not to focus too much on the gear. It is fun, it is exciting watching the product launches, seeing the developments and all that kind of stuff. But a bit like when you see those, pro photographer versus amateur photographer, and one of them's using a £20,000 camera, one of them's using a 20 quid disposable camera. It's what you do with it that counts. Stick around on the channel, do subscribe, tons of education here. That's where our interest lies, more so than the gear itself. Anyway, hope you found this video interesting. Leave your comments below and we will see you next time.